Chapter 5. The Poet and the Editor. It was not bad sport, being in London entirely on our own hook. We asked the way to Fleet Street, where father says all the newspaper offices are. They said straight on down Ludgate Hill, but it turned out to be quite another way. At least we didn't go straight on. We got to St. Paul's. Noel would go in, and we saw where Gordon was buried, at least the monument. It is very flat, considering what a man he was. When we came out, we walked a long way, and when we asked a policeman, he said we'd better go back through Smithfield. So we did. They don't burn people any more there now, so it was rather dull, besides being a long way, and Noel got very tired. He's a peaky little chap. It comes of being a poet, I think. We had a bun or two at different shops, out of the shillings, and it was quite late in the afternoon when we got to Fleet Street. The gas was lighted and the electric lights. There is a jolly Bovril sign that comes off and on in different coloured lamps. We went to the Daily Recorder office and asked to see the editor. It is a big office, very bright, with brass and mahogany and electric lights. They told us the editor wasn't there, but at another office. So we went down a dirty street to a very dull-looking place. There was a man there inside in a glass case, as if he was a museum, and he told us to write down our names and our business. So Oswald wrote -- Oswald, Bastable. Noel, Bastable. Business, very private indeed. Then we waited on the stone stairs. It was very draughty, and the man in the glass case looked at us as if we were the museum instead of him. We waited a long time, and then a boy came down and said, "The editor can't see you. Will you please write your business?" And he laughed. I wanted to punch his head, but Noel said, "Yes, I'll write it, if you'll give me a pen and ink and a sheet of paper and an envelope." The boy said he'd better write by post, but Noel is a bit pig-headed. It's his worst fault. So he said, "No, I'll write it now." So I backed him up by saying, "Look at the price penny stamps are since the coal strike." So the boy grinned, and the man in the glass case gave us pen and paper, and Noel wrote. Oswald writes better than he does, but Noel would do it, and it took a very long time, and then it was inky. "Dear Mr. Editor, I want you to print my poetry and pay for it, and I am a friend of Mrs. Leslie's. She is a poet too. Your affectionate friend, Noel Bastable." He licked the envelope a good deal, so that boy shouldn't read it going upstairs, and he wrote "very private" outside and gave the letter to the boy. I thought it wasn't any good, but in a minute the grinning boy came back, and he was quite respectful and said, "The editor says, please will you step up?" We stepped up. There were a lot of stairs and passages, and a queer sort of humming, hammering sound, and a very funny smell. The boy was now very polite and said it was the ink we smelt, and the noise was the printing machines. After going through a lot of cold passages, we came to a door. The boy opened it and let us go in. There was a large room with a big, soft, blue and red carpet and a roaring fire, though it was only October, and a large table with drawers and littered with papers, just like the one in father's study. A gentleman was sitting at one side of the table. He had a light moustache and light eyes, and he looked very young to be an editor, not nearly so old as father. He looked very tired and sleepy, as if he had got up very early in the morning, but he was kind, and we liked him. Oswald thought he looked clever. Oswald is considered a judge of faces. "Well," said he, "so you are Mrs. Leslie's friends?" "I think so," said Noel. "At least she gave us each a shilling, and she wished us good hunting." "Good hunting, eh? Well, what about this poetry of yours? Which is the poet?" I can't think how he could have asked. Oswald is said to be a very manly-looking boy for his age. However, I thought it would look duffing to be offended, so I said, "This is my brother Noel. He is the poet." Noel had turned quite pale. He is disgustingly like a girl in some ways. The editor told us to sit down, and he took the poems from Noel and began to read them. Noel got paler and paler. I really thought he was going to faint, like he did when I held his hand under the cold water tap after I had accidentally cut him with my chisel. When the editor had read the first poem, it was the one about the beetle, He got up and stood with his back to us. It was not manners, but Noel thinks he did it to conceal his emotion, as they do in books. He read all the poems, and then he said, "I like your poetry very much, young man. I'll give you, let me see, how much shall I give you for it?" "As much as ever you can," said Noel. "You see, I want a good deal of money to restore the fallen fortunes of the House of Bastable." The gentleman put on some eyeglasses and looked hard at us. Then he sat down. "That's a good idea," said he. "Tell me how you came to think of it. And I say, have you had any tea? They've just sent out for mine." He rang a tingly bell, and the boy brought in a tray with a teapot and a thick cup and saucer and things, and he had to fetch another tray for us, when he was told to, and we had tea with the editor of the Daily Recorder. I suppose it was a very proud moment for Noel, though I did not think of that till afterwards. The editor asked us a lot of questions, and we told him a good deal, though of course I did not tell a stranger all our reasons for thinking that the family fortunes wanted restoring. We stayed about half an hour, and when we were going away he said again, "I shall print all your poems, my poet, and now what do you think they're worth?" "I don't know," Noel said. "You see, I didn't write them to sell." "Why did you write them then?" he asked. Noel said he didn't know. He supposed because he wanted to. "Art for art's sake, eh?" said the editor, and he seemed quite delighted, as though Noel had said something clever. "Well, would a guinea meet your views?" he asked. "I have read of people being at a loss for words and dumb with emotion, and I've read of people being turned to stone with astonishment or joy or something, but I never knew how silly it looked till I saw Noel standing staring at the editor with his mouth open. He went red and he went white, and then he got crimson, as if you were rubbing more and more crimson lake on a palette. But he didn't say a word, so Oswald had to say, "I should jolly well think so." So the editor gave Noel a sovereign and a shilling, and he shook hands with us both, but he thumped Noel on the back and said, "Buck up, old man. It's your first guinea, but it won't be your last. Now go along home, and in about 10 years you can bring me some more poetry. Not before, see? I'm just taking this poetry of yours because I like it very much, but we don't put poetry in this paper at all. I shall have to put it in another paper I know of." "What do you put in your paper?" I asked, for father always takes the Daily Chronicle, and I didn't know what the Recorder was like. We chose it because it has such a glorious office and a clock outside lighted up. "Oh, news," said he, "and dull articles and things about celebrities, if you know any celebrities now." Noel asked him what celebrities were. "Oh, the Queen and the princes, and people with titles, and people who write or sing or act or do something clever or wicked." "I don't know anybody wicked," said Oswald, wishing he had known Dick Turpin or Claude Duval, so as to be able to tell the editor things about them. "But I know someone with a title, Lord Tottenham." "The mad old protectionist, eh? How did you come to know him?" "We don't know him to speak to, but he goes over the heath every day at 3, and he strides along like a giant, with a black cloak like Lord Tennyson's flying behind him, and he talks to himself like 1 o'clock. "What does he say?" The editor had sat down again, and he was fiddling with a blue pencil. We only heard him once, close enough to understand, and then he said, "The curse of the country, sir, ruin and desolation." And then he went striding along again, hitting at the furze bushes as if they were the heads of his enemies. "Excellent descriptive touch," said the editor. "Well, go on." "That's all I know about him, except that he stops in the middle of the heath every day, and he looks all round to see if there's anyone about, and if there isn't, he takes his collar off." The editor interrupted, which is considered rude, and said, "You're not romancing." "I beg your pardon," said Oswald. "Drawing the long bow, I mean," said the editor. Oswald drew himself up and said he wasn't a liar. The editor only laughed and said romancing and lying were not at all the same, only it was important to know what you were playing at. So Oswald accepted his apology and went on. "We were hiding among the furze bushes one day, and we saw him do it. He took off his collar, and he put on a clean one, and he threw the other among the furze bushes. We picked it up afterwards, and it was a beastly paper one. "Thank you," said the editor, and he got up and put his hand in his pocket. "That's well worth 5 shillings, and there they are. Would you like to see round the printing offices before you go home?" I pocketed my 5 bob and thanked him, and I said we should like it very much. He called another gentleman and said something we couldn't hear. Then he said goodbye again, and all this time Noel hadn't said a word, but now he said, "I've made a poem about you. It is called Lines to a Noble Editor. Shall I write it down?" The editor gave him the blue pencil, and he sat down at the editor's table and wrote. It was this, he told me afterwards, as well as he could remember. "May life's choicest blessings be your lot. I think you ought to be very blessed, for you are going to print my poems, and you may have this one as well as the rest." "Thank you," said the editor. "I don't think I ever had a poem addressed to me before. I shall treasure it, I assure you." Then the other gentleman said something about Maecenas, and we went off to see the printing office with at least £1.7 in our pockets. It was good hunting, and no mistake. But he never put Noel's poetry in the Daily Recorder. It was quite a long time afterwards we saw a sort of story thing in a magazine on the station bookstall, and that kind, sleepy-looking editor had written it, I suppose. It was not at all amusing. It said a lot about Noel and me, describing us all wrong, and saying how we had tea with the editor, and all Noel's poems were in the story thing. I think myself the editor seemed to make game of them, but Noel was quite pleased to see them printed, so that's all right. It wasn't my poetry anyhow, I am glad to say. Chapter 6. Noel's Princess. She happened quite accidentally. We were not looking for a princess at all just then, but Noel had said he was going to find a princess all by himself and marry her, and he really did. Which was rather odd, because when people say things are going to befall, very often they don't. It was different, of course, with the prophets of old. We did not get any treasure by it, except 12 chocolate drops. But we might have done, and it was an adventure anyhow. Greenwich Park is a jolly good place to play in, especially the parts that aren't near Greenwich. The parts near the Heath are first-rate. I often wish the park was nearer our house, but I suppose a park is a difficult thing to move. Sometimes we get Eliza to put lunch in a basket, and we go up to the park. She likes that. It saves cooking dinner for us. And sometimes she says of her own accord, "I've made some pasties for you, and you might as well go into the park as not. It's a lovely day." She always tells us to rinse out the cup at the drinking fountain, and the girls do, but I always put my head under the tap and drink. Then you are an intrepid hunter at a mountain stream, and besides, you're sure it's clean. Dickie does the same, and so does H.O., but Noel always drinks out of the cup. He says it is a golden goblet wrought by enchanted gnomes. The day the princess happened was a fine, hot day last October, and we were quite tired with the walk up to the park. We always go in by the little gate at the top of Crooms Hill. It is the postern gate that things always happen at in stories. It was dusty walking, but when we got in the park it was ripping, so we rested a bit and lay on our backs and looked up at the trees and wished we could play monkeys. I have done it before now, but the park keeper makes a row if he catches you. When we'd rested a little, Alice said, "It was a long way to the enchanted wood, but it is very nice now we are there. I wonder what we shall find in it." "We shall find deer," said Dickie, "if we go to look. But they go on the other side of the park because of the people with buns." Saying buns made us think of lunch, so we had it, and when we had done we scratched a hole under a tree and buried the papers, because we know it spoils pretty places to leave beastly greasy papers lying about. I remember Mother teaching me and Dora that when we were quite little. I wish everybody's parents would teach them this useful lesson, and the same about orange peel. When we'd eaten everything there was, Alice whispered, "I see the white witch bear yonder among the trees. Let's track it and slay it in its lair." "I am the bear," said Noel. So he crept away, and we followed him among the trees. Often the witch bear was out of sight, and then you didn't know where it would jump out from, but sometimes we saw it and just followed. "When we catch it, there'll be a great fight," said Oswald, "and I shall be Count Folco of Montfaucon." I'll be Gabrielle, said Dora. She is the only one of us who likes doing girls' parts. I'll be Sintram, said Alice, and H.O. can be the little master. What about Dicky? Oh, I can be the pilgrim with the bones. Hist, whispered Alice. See his white fairy fur gleaming amid yonder covert. And I saw a bit of white too. It was Noel's collar, and it had come undone at the back. We hunted the bear in and out of the trees, and then we lost him altogether, and suddenly we found the wall of the park, in a place where I'm sure there wasn't a wall before. Noel wasn't anywhere about, and there was a door in the wall, and it was open, so we went through. The bear has hidden himself in these mountain fastnesses, Oswald said. I will draw my good sword and after him. So I drew the umbrella, which Dora always will bring in case it rains, because Noel gets a cold on the chest at the least thing, and we went on. The other side of the wall, it was a stable yard, all cobblestones. There was nobody about, but we could hear a man rubbing down a horse and hissing in the stable, so we crept very quietly past, and Alice whispered, "'Tis the lair of the monster serpent. I hear his deadly hiss. Beware! Courage and dispatch!" We went over the stones on tiptoe, and we found another wall with another door in it on the other side. We went through that too, on tiptoe. It really was an adventure. And there we were in a shrubbery, and we saw something white through the trees. Dora said it was the white bear. That is so like Dora. She always begins to take part in a play just when the rest of us are getting tired of it. I don't mean this unkindly, because I am very fond of Dora. I cannot forget how kind she was when I had bronchitis, and ingratitude is a dreadful vice. But it is quite true. It is not a bear, said Oswald, and we all went on, still on tiptoe, round a twisty path and onto a lawn, and there was Noel. His collar had come undone, as I said, and he had an inky mark on his face that he made just before we left the house, and he wouldn't let Dora wash it off, and one of his bootlaces was coming down. He was standing looking at a little girl. She was the funniest little girl you ever saw. She was like a china doll, the sixpenny kind. She had a white face and long yellow hair done up very tight in two pigtails. Her forehead was very big and lumpy, and her cheeks came high up, like little shelves under her eyes. Her eyes were small and blue. She had on a funny black frock with curly braid on it and button boots that went almost up to her knees. Her legs were very thin. She was sitting in a hammock chair nursing a blue kitten, not a sky blue one, of course, but the colour of a new slate pencil. As we came up, we heard her say to Noel, "Who are you?" Noel had forgotten about the bear, and he was taking his favourite part, so he said, "I'm Prince Camaralzaman." The funny little girl looked pleased. "I thought at first you were a common boy," she said. Then she saw the rest of us and said, "Are you all princesses and princes too?" Of course we said yes, and she said, "I am a princess also." She said it very well too, exactly as if it were true. We were very glad, because it is so seldom you meet any children who can begin to play right off without having everything explained to them. And even then they will say they are going to pretend to be a lion, or a witch, or a king. Now this little girl just said, "I am a princess." Then she looked at Oswald and said, "I fancy I've seen you at Baden." Of course, Oswald said, "Very likely." The little girl had a funny voice, and all her words were quite plain, each word by itself. She didn't talk at all like we do. H.O. asked her what the cat's name was, and she said, "Katinka." Then Dicky said, "Let's get away from the windows. If you play near windows, someone inside generally knocks at them and says, 'Don't.'" The princess put down the cat very carefully and said, "I am forbidden to walk off the grass." "That's a pity," said Dora. "But I will if you like," said the princess. "You mustn't do things you are forbidden to do," Dora said, but Dicky showed us that there was some more grass beyond the shrubs, with only a gravel path between. So I lifted the princess over the gravel so that she should be able to say she hadn't walked off the grass. When we got to the other grass, we all sat down, and the princess asked us if we liked draggees. I know that's how you spell it, for I asked Albert next door's uncle. We said we thought not, but she pulled a real silver box out of her pocket and showed us. They were just flat, round chocolates. We had two each. Then we asked her her name, and she began. And when she began, she went on and on and on, till I thought she was never going to stop. H.O. said she had 50 names, but Dickie is very good at figures, and he says there were only 18. The first were Pauline, Alexandra, Alice, and Mary was one, and Victoria, for we all heard that, and it ended up with Hildegard Kunigonde something or other, princess of something else. When she'd done, H.O. said, "That's jolly good. Say it again." And she did, but even then we couldn't remember it. We told her our names, but she thought they were too short, so when it was Noel's turn, he said he was Prince Noel Camaralzaman, Ivan Constantine, Charlemagne, James, John, Edward Biggs, Maximilian Bastable, Prince of Lewisham. But when she asked him to say it again, of course, he could only get the first two names right, because he'd made it up as he went on. So the princess said, "You are quite old enough to know your own name." She was very grave and serious. She told us that she was the fifth cousin of Queen Victoria. We asked who the other cousins were, but she did not seem to understand. She went on and said she was 7 times removed. She couldn't tell us what that meant either, but Oswald thinks it means that the Queen's cousins are so fond of her that they will keep coming bothering, so the Queen's servants have orders to remove them. This little girl must have been very fond of the Queen to try so often to see her, and to have been 7 times removed. We could see that it is considered something to be proud of, but we thought it was hard on the Queen that her cousins wouldn't let her alone. Presently the little girl asked us where our maids and governesses were. We told her we hadn't any just now, and she said, "How pleasant! And did you come here alone?" "Yes," said Dora. "We came across the heath." "You are very fortunate," said the little girl. She sat very upright on the grass, with her fat little hands in her lap. "I should like to go on the heath. There are donkeys there, with white saddle covers. I should like to ride them, but my governess will not permit." "I'm glad we haven't a governess," H.O. said. "We ride the donkeys whenever we have any pennies, and once I gave the man another penny to make it gallop." "You are indeed fortunate," said the princess again, and when she looked sad, the shelves on her cheeks showed more than ever. "You could have laid a 6pence on them quite safely if you had had one." "Never mind," said Noel. "I've got a lot of money. Come out and have a ride now." But the little girl shook her head and said she was afraid it would not be correct. Dora said she was quite right. Then all of a sudden came one of those uncomfortable times when nobody can think of anything to say, so we sat and looked at each other. But at last Alice said we ought to be going. "Do not go yet," the little girl said. "At what time did they order your carriage?" "Our carriage is a fairy one, drawn by griffins, and it comes when we wish for it," said Noel. The little girl looked at him very queerly and said, "That is out of a picture book." Then Noel said he thought it was about time he was married if we were to be home in time for tea. The little girl was rather stupid over it, but she did what we told her, and we married them with Dora's pocket handkerchief for a veil, and the ring off the back of one of the buttons on H.O.'s blouse just went on her little finger. Then we showed her how to play cross-touch and puss in the corner and tag. It was funny, she didn't know any games but battledore and shuttlecock and les graces. But she really began to laugh at last, and not to look quite so like a doll. She was Puss and was running after Dickie when suddenly she stopped short and looked as if she was going to cry. And we looked too, and there were 2 prim ladies with little mouths and tight hair. One of them said in quite an awful voice, "Pauline, who are these children?" And her voice was gruff, with very curly R's. The little girl said we were princes and princesses, which was silly to a grown-up person that is not a great friend of yours. The gruff lady gave a short, horrid laugh, like a husky bark, and said, "Princes, indeed. They're only common children." Dora turned very red and began to speak, but the little girl cried out, "Common children. Oh, I am so glad. When I am grown up, I'll always play with common children." And she ran at us and began to kiss us one by one, beginning with Alice. She had got to H.O. when the horrid lady said, "Your Highness, go indoors at once." The little girl answered, "I won't." Then the prim lady said, "Wilson, carry Her Highness indoors." And the little girl was carried away, screaming and kicking with her little thin legs and her buttoned boots, and between her screams she shrieked, "Common children, I am glad, glad, glad. Common children, common children." The nasty lady then remarked, "Go at once, or I will send for the police." So we went. H.O. made a face at her, and so did Alice, but Oswald took off his cap and said he was sorry if she was annoyed about anything, for Oswald has always been taught to be polite to ladies, however nasty. Dickie took his off too when he saw me do it. He says he did it first, but that is a mistake. If I were really a common boy, I should say it was a lie. Then we all came away, and when we got outside, Dora said, "So she was really a princess. Fancy a princess living there." "Even princesses have to live somewhere," said Dickie. "And I thought it was play. And it was real. I wish I'd known." "I should have liked to ask her lots of things," said Alice. H.O. said he would have liked to ask her what she had for dinner and whether she had a crown. I felt, myself, we had lost a chance of finding out a great deal about kings and queens. I might have known such a stupid-looking little girl would never have been able to pretend as well as that. So we all went home across the heath and made dripping toast for tea. When we were eating it, Noel said, "I wish I could give her some. It is very good." He sighed as he said it, and his mouth was very full, so we knew he was thinking of his princess. He says now that she was as beautiful as the day, but we remember her quite well, and she was nothing of the kind. Chapter 7. Being Bandits. Noel was quite tiresome for ever so long after we found the princess. He would keep on wanting to go to the park when the rest of us didn't, and though we went several times to please him, we never found that door open again, and all of us except him knew from the first that it would be no go. So now we thought it was time to do something to rouse him from the stupor of despair, which is always done to heroes when anything baffling has occurred. Besides, we were getting very short of money again. The fortunes of your house cannot be restored, not so that they will last, that is, even by the £1.8 we got when we had the good hunting. We spent a good deal of that on presents for Father's birthday. We got him a paperweight, like a glass bun, with a picture of Lewisham Church at the bottom, and a blotting pad, and a box of preserved fruits, and an ivory penholder with a view of Greenwich Park in the little hole where you look through at the top. He was most awfully pleased and surprised, and when he heard how Noel and Oswald had earned the money to buy the things, he was more surprised still. Nearly all the rest of our money went to get fireworks for the 5th of November. We got 6 Catherine wheels and 4 rockets, 2 handlights, 1 red and 1 green, a 6-penny maroon, 2 Roman candles. They cost a shilling, some Italian streamers, a fairy fountain, and a tourbillon that cost 18 pence and was very nearly worth it. But I think crackers and squibs are a mistake. It's true you get a lot of them for the money, and they are not bad fun for the first 2 or 3 dozen, but you get jolly sick of them before you've let off your sixpenn'orth, and the only amusing way is not allowed, it is putting them in the fire. It always seems a long time till the evening when you have got fireworks in the house, and I think as it was a rather foggy day we should have decided to let them off directly after breakfast, only Father had said he would help us to let them off at 8 o'clock after he had had his dinner, and you ought never to disappoint your father if you can help it. You see, we had 3 good reasons for trying H.O.'s idea of restoring the fallen fortunes of our house by becoming bandits on the 5th of November. We had a 4th reason as well, and that was the best reason of the lot. You remember Dora thought it would be wrong to be bandits, and the 5th of November came while Dora was away at Stroud staying with her godmother. Stroud is in Gloucestershire. We were determined to do it while she was out of the way, because we did not think it wrong, and besides, we meant to do it anyhow. We held a council, of course, and laid our plans very carefully. We let H.O. be captain because it was his idea. Oswald was lieutenant. Oswald was quite fair because he let H.O. call himself captain. But Oswald is the eldest next to Dora after all. Our plan was this. We were all to go up onto the heath. Our house is in the Lewisham Road, but it's quite close to the heath if you cut up the short way opposite the confectioner's, past the nursery gardens and the cottage hospital, and turn to the left again and afterwards to the right. You come out then at the top of the hill, where the big guns are with the iron fence round them, and where the bands play on Thursday evenings in the summer. We were to lurk in ambush there, and waylay an unwary traveller. We were to call upon him to surrender his arms, and then bring him home and put him in the deepest dungeon below the castle moat. Then we were to load him with chains and send to his friends for ransom. You may think we had no chains, but you are wrong, because we used to keep 2 other dogs once, besides Pincher, before the fall of the fortunes of the ancient house of Bastable, and they were quite big dogs. It was latish in the afternoon before we started. We thought we could lurk better if it was nearly dark. It was rather foggy, and we waited a good while beside the railings, but all the belated travellers were either grown up or else they were board school children. We weren't going to get into a row with grown-up people, especially strangers, and no true bandit would ever stoop to ask a ransom from the relations of the poor and needy, so we thought it better to wait. As I said, it was Guy Fawkes' Day, and if it had not been, we should never have been able to be bandits at all, for the unwary traveller we did catch had been forbidden to go out because he had a cold in his head. But he would run out to follow a guy, without even putting on a coat or a comforter, and it was a very damp, foggy afternoon, and nearly dark, so you see it was his own fault entirely, and served him jolly well right. We saw him coming over the heath just as we were deciding to go home to tea. He had followed that guy right across to the village. We call Blackheath the village, I don't know why, and he was coming back dragging his feet and sniffing. "Hist! An unwary traveller approaches," whispered Oswald. "Muffle your horses' heads and see to the priming of your pistols," muttered Alice. She always will play boys' parts, and she makes Ellis cut her hair short on purpose. Ellis is a very obliging hairdresser. "Steal softly upon him," said Noel, "for lo, 'tis dusk, and no human eyes can mark our deeds." So we ran out and surrounded the unwary traveller. It turned out to be Albert next door, and he was very frightened indeed until he saw who we were. "Surrender!" hissed Oswald in a desperate-sounding voice, as he caught the arm of the unwary, and Albert next door said, "All right, I'm surrendering as hard as I can. You needn't pull my arm off." We explained to him that resistance was useless, and I think he saw that from the first. We held him tight by both arms, and we marched him home down the hill in a hollow square of 5. He wanted to tell us about the guy, but we made him see that it was not proper for prisoners to talk to the guard, especially about guys that the prisoner had been told not to go after because of his cold. When we got to where we live, he said, "All right, I don't want to tell you. You'll wish I had afterwards. You never saw such a guy." "I can see you," said H.O. It was very rude, and Oswald told him so at once, because it is his duty as an elder brother. But H.O. is very young and does not know better yet. And besides, it wasn't bad, for H.O. Albert next door said, "You haven't any manners, and I want to go into my tea. Let go of me." But Alice told him, quite kindly, that he was not going into his tea, but coming with us. "I'm not," said Albert next door. "I'm going home. Leave go. I've got a bad cold. You're making it worse." Then he tried to cough, which was very silly, because we'd seen him in the morning, and he'd told us where the cold was that he wasn't to go out with. When he had tried to cough, he said, "Leave go of me. You see, my cold's getting worse." "You should have thought of that before," said Dickie. "You're coming in with us." "Don't be a silly," said Noel. "You know we told you at the very beginning that resistance was useless. There is no disgrace in yielding. We are 5 to your 1. By this time Eliza had opened the door, and we thought it best to take him in without any more parleying. To parley with a prisoner is not done by bandits. Directly we got him safe into the nursery, H.O. began to jump about and say, "Now you're a prisoner really and truly." And Albert next door began to cry. He always does. I wonder he didn't begin long before, but Alice fetched him one of the dried fruits we gave father for his birthday. It was a green walnut. I have noticed the walnuts and the plums always get left till the last in the box. The apricots go first, and then the figs and pears, and the cherries, if there are any. So he ate it and shut up. Then we explained his position to him so that there should be no mistake, and he couldn't say afterwards that he had not understood. There will be no violence, said Oswald. He was now captain of the bandits, because we all know H.O. likes to be chaplain when we play prisoners. No violence. But you will be confined in a dark, subterranean dungeon where toads and snakes crawl, and but little of the light of day filters through the heavily mullioned windows. You will be loaded with chains. Now don't begin again, baby. There's nothing to cry about. Straw will be your pallet. Beside you, the jailer will set a ewer. A ewer is only a jug, stupid. It won't eat you. A ewer with water, and a mouldering crust will be your food. But Albert next door never enters into the spirit of a thing. He mumbled something about tea time. Now Oswald, though stern, is always just. And besides, we were all rather hungry, and tea was ready. So we had it at once, Albert next door and all, and we gave him what was left of the 4-pound jar of apricot jam we got with the money Noel got for his poetry, and we saved our crusts for the prisoner. Albert next door was very tiresome. Nobody could have had a nicer prison than he had. We fenced him into a corner with the old wire nursery fender and all the chairs, instead of putting him in the coal cellar as we had first intended. And when he said the dog chains were cold, the girls were kind enough to warm his fetters thoroughly at the fire before we put them on him. We got the straw cases of some bottles of wine someone sent father one Christmas. It is some years ago, but the cases are quite good. We unpacked them very carefully and pulled them to pieces and scattered the straw about. It made a lovely straw pallet and took ever so long to make, but Albert next door has yet to learn what gratitude really is. We got the bread trencher for the wooden platter where the prisoners' crusts were put. They were not mouldy, but we could not wait till they got so, and for the ewer we got the toilet jug out of the spare room where nobody ever sleeps, and even then Albert next door couldn't be happy like the rest of us. He howled and cried and tried to get out, and he knocked the ewer over and stamped on the mouldering crusts. Luckily there was no water in the ewer because we had forgotten it, only dust and spiders. So we tied him up with the clothesline from the back kitchen, and we had to hurry up, which was a pity for him. We might have had him rescued by a devoted page if he hadn't been so tiresome. In fact, Noel was actually dressing up for the page when Albert next door kicked over the prison ewer. We got a sheet of paper out of an old exercise book, and we made H.O. prick his own thumb because he is our little brother, and it is our duty to teach him to be brave. We none of us mind pricking ourselves. We've done it heaps of times. H.O. didn't like it, but he agreed to do it, and I helped him a little because he was so slow, and when he saw the red bead of blood getting fatter and bigger as I squeezed his thumb, he was very pleased, just as I had told him he would be. This is what we wrote with H.O.'s blood, only the blood gave out when we got to restored, and we had to write the rest with Crimson Lake, which is not the same colour, though I always use it, myself, for painting wounds. While Oswald was writing it, he heard Alice whispering to the prisoner that it would soon be over, and it was only play. The prisoner left off howling, so I pretended not to hear what she said. A bandit captain has to overlook things sometimes. This was the letter dash. Albert Morrison is held a prisoner by bandits. On payment of £3,000, he will be restored to his sorrowing relatives, and all will be forgotten and forgiven. I was not sure about the last part, but Dickie was certain he had seen it in the paper, so I suppose it must have been all right. We let H.O. take the letter. It was only fair, as it was his blood it was written with, and told him to leave it next door for Mrs. Morrison. H.O. came back quite quickly, and Albert next door's uncle came with him. "What is all this, Albert?" he cried. "Alas, alas, my nephew! Do I find you the prisoner of a desperate band of brigands?" "Bandits," said H.O. "You know it says bandits." "I beg your pardon, gentlemen," said Albert next door's uncle. "Bandits it is, of course. This, Albert, is the direct result of the pursuit of the guy on an occasion when your doting mother had expressly warned you to forgo the pleasures of the chase." Albert said it wasn't his fault, and he hadn't wanted to play. "So ho!" said his uncle. "Impenitent, too. Where's the dungeon?" We explained the dungeon and showed him the straw pallet and the ewer and the mouldering crusts and other things. "Very pretty and complete," he said. "Albert, you are more highly privileged than ever I was. No one ever made me a nice dungeon when I was your age. I think I had better leave you where you are." Albert began to cry again and said he was sorry and he would be a good boy. "And on this old familiar basis, you expect me to ransom you, do you? Honestly, my nephew, I doubt whether you are worth it. Besides, the sum mentioned in this document strikes me as excessive. Albert really is not worth £3,000. Also, by a strange and unfortunate chance, I haven't the money about me. Couldn't you take less?" We said perhaps we could. "Say 8p," suggested Albert next door's uncle, "which is all the small change I happen to have on my person." "Thank you very much," said Alice as he held it out. "But are you sure you can spare it? Because really it was only play." "Quite sure. Now, Albert, the game is over. You had better run home to your mother and tell her how much you've enjoyed yourself." When Albert next door had gone, his uncle sat in the Guy Fawkes armchair and took Alice on his knee, and we sat round the fire waiting till it would be time to let off our fireworks. We roasted the chestnuts he sent Dickie out for, and he told us stories till it was nearly 7. His stories are first-rate. He does all the parts in different voices. At last he said, "Look here, young'uns, I like to see you play and enjoy yourselves, and I don't think it hurts Albert to enjoy himself too." "I don't think he did much," said H.O. But I knew what Albert next door's uncle meant, because I am much older than H.O. He went on, "But what about Albert's mother? Didn't you think how anxious she would be at his not coming home? As it happens, I saw him come in with you, so we knew it was all right. But if I hadn't, eh?" "He only talks like that when he's very serious, or even angry. Other times he talks like people in books, to us, I mean." We none of us said anything, but I was thinking. Then Alice spoke. Girls seem not to mind saying things that we don't say. She put her arms round Albert next door's uncle's neck and said, "We're very, very sorry. We didn't think about his mother. You see, we try very hard not to think about other people's mothers because—" Just then we heard Father's key in the door, and Albert next door's uncle kissed Alice and put her down, and we all went down to meet Father. As we went, I thought I heard Albert next door's uncle say something that sounded like "poor little beggars." He couldn't have meant us when we'd been having such a jolly time, and chestnuts and fireworks to look forward to after dinner and everything. Chapter 8. Being Editors. It was Albert's uncle who thought of our trying a newspaper. He said he thought we should not find the bandit business a paying industry as a permanency, and that journalism might be. We had sold Noel's poetry and that piece of information about Lord Tottenham to the good editor, so we thought it would not be a bad idea to have a newspaper of our own. We saw plainly that editors must be very rich and powerful because of the grand office and the man in the glass case, like a museum, and the soft carpets and big writing table. Besides our having seen a whole handful of money that the editor pulled out quite carelessly from his trousers pocket when he gave me my 5 bob. Dora wanted to be editor, and so did Oswald, but he gave way to her because she is a girl, and afterwards he knew that it is true what it says in the copybooks about virtue being its own reward, because you've no idea what a bother it is. Everybody wanted to put in everything just as they liked, no matter how much room there was on the page. It was simply awful. Dora put up with it as long as she could, and then she said if she wasn't, let alone she wouldn't go on being editor. They could be the paper's editors themselves, so there. Then Oswald said, like a good brother, "I will help you if you like, Dora." And she said, "You're more trouble than all the rest of them. Come and be editor, and see how you like it. I give it up to you." But she didn't, and we did it together. We let Albert next door be sub-editor, because he had hurt his foot with a nail in his boot that gathered. When it was done, Albert next door's uncle had it copied for us in typewriting, and we sent copies to all our friends, and then, of course, there was no one left that we could ask to buy it. We did not think of that until too late. We called the paper the Lewisham Recorder. Lewisham because we live there, and recorder in memory of the good editor. I could write a better paper on my head, but an editor is not allowed to write all the paper. It is very hard, but he is not. You just have to fill up with what you can get from other writers. If I ever have time, I will write a paper all by myself. It won't be patchy. We had no time to make it an illustrated paper, but I drew the ship going down with all hands for the first copy. But the typewriter can't draw ships, so it was left out in the other copies. The time the first paper took to write out, no one would believe. This was the newspaper, the Lewisham Recorder. Editors, Dora and Oswald Bastable. Editorial note. Every paper is written for some reason. Ours is because we want to sell it and get money. If what we have written brings happiness to any sad heart, we shall not have labored in vain. But we want the money too. Many papers are content with the sad heart and the happiness, but we are not like that, and it is best not to be deceitful. Editors. There will be 2 serial stories, one by Dickie and one by all of us. In a serial story, you only put in 1 chapter at a time, but we shall put all our serial story at once, if Dora has time to copy it. Dickie's will come later on. Serial Story by Us All, Chapter 1, by Dora. The sun was setting behind a romantic-looking tower when 2 strangers might have been observed descending the crest of the hill. The eldest, a man in the prime of life, the other a handsome youth who reminded everybody of Quentin Durward. They approached the castle in which the fair Lady Alicia awaited her deliverers. She leaned from the castellated window and waved her lily hand as they approached. They returned her signal and retired to seek rest and refreshment at a neighbouring hostelry. Chapter 2, by Alice. The princess was very uncomfortable in the tower, because her fairy godmother had told her all sorts of horrid things would happen if she didn't catch a mouse every day, and she had caught so many mice that now there were hardly any left to catch, so she sent her carrier pigeon to ask the noble strangers if they could send her a few mice, because she would be of age in a few days, and then it wouldn't matter. So the fairy godmother, I'm very sorry, but there's no room to make the chapters any longer. E.D. Chapter 3, by the sub-editor. I can't. I'd much rather not. I don't know how. Chapter 4, by Dickie. I must now retrace my steps and tell you something about our hero. You must know he had been to an awfully jolly school, where they had turkey and goose every day for dinner, and never any mutton, and as many helps of pudding as a fellow cared to send up his plate for, so of course they had all grown up very strong, and before he left school he challenged the head to have it out man to man, and he gave it him, I tell you. That was the education that made him able to fight Red Indians, and to be the stranger who might have been observed in the first chapter. Chapter 5, by Noel. I think it's time something happened in this story. So then the dragon he came out, blowing fire out of his nose, and he said, "Come on, you valiant man. And true, I'd like to have a set too along of you." That's bad English. E.D. I don't care. It's what the dragon said. Who told you dragons didn't talk bad English? Noel. So the hero, whose name was Noeloninuris, replied, "My blade is sharp, my axe is keen. You're not nearly as big as a good many dragons I've seen." Don't put in so much poetry, Noel. It's not fair, because none of the others can do it. E.D. And then they went at it, and he beat the dragon just as he did the head in Dickie's part of the story. And so he married the princess, and they lived. No, they didn't. Not till the last chapter. E.D. Chapter 6, by H.O. I think it's a very nice story. But what about the mice? I don't want to say any more. Dora can have what's left of my chapter. Chapter 7, by the editors. And so, when the dragon was dead, there were lots of mice, because he used to kill them for his tea, but now they rapidly multiplied and ravaged the country, so the fair Lady Alicia, sometimes called the princess, had to say she would not marry anyone unless they could rid the country of this plague of mice. Then the prince, whose real name didn't begin with N, but was Osrawaldo, waved his magic sword, and the dragon stood before them, bowing gracefully. They made him promise to be good, and then they forgave him. And when the wedding breakfast came, all the bones were saved for him. And so they were married and lived happy ever after. What became of the other stranger? Noel. The dragon ate him because he asked too many questions. Editors. This is the end of the story. Instructive. It only takes 4 hours and a quarter now to get from London to Manchester, but I should not think anyone would if they could help it. A dreadful warning. A wicked boy told me a very instructive thing about ginger. They had opened one of the large jars, and he happened to take out quite a lot, and he made it all right by dropping marbles in, till there was as much ginger as before. But he told me that on the Sunday, when it was coming near the part where there is only juice generally, I had no idea what his feelings were. I don't see what he could have said when they asked him. I should be sorry to act like it. Scientific. Experiments should always be made out of doors, and don't use benzoline. Dicky. That was when he burnt his eyebrows off. E.D. The Earth is 2,400 miles round and 800 through. At least I think so, but perhaps it's the other way. Dicky. You ought to have been sure before you began. E.D. Scientific column. In this so-called 19th century, science is but too little considered in the nurseries of the rich and proud, but we are not like that. It is not generally known that if you put bits of camphor in lukewarm water, it will move about. If you drop sweet oil in, the camphor will dart away and then stop moving. But don't drop any till you are tired of it, because the camphor won't any more afterwards. Much amusement and instruction is lost by not knowing things like this. If you put a sixpence under a shilling in a wine glass and blow hard down the side of the glass, the sixpence will jump up and sit on the top of the shilling. At least I can't do it myself, but my cousin can. He is in the Navy. Answers to correspondence. Noel. You are very poetical, but I am sorry to say it will not do. Alice. Nothing will ever make your hair curl, so it's no use. Some people say it's more important to tidy up as you go along. I don't mean you in particular, but everyone. H.O. We never said you were tubby, but the editor does not know any cure. Noel. If there is any of the paper over when this newspaper is finished, I will exchange it for your shut-up inkstand, or the knife that has the useful thing in it for taking stones out of horses' feet, but you can't have it without. H.O. There are many ways how your steam engine might stop working. You might ask Dicky. He knows one of them. I think it is the way yours stopped. Noel. If you think that by filling the garden with sand, you can make crabs build their nest there, you are not at all sensible. You have altered your poem about the Battle of Waterloo so often that we cannot read it except where the Duke waves his sword and says something we can't read either. Why did you write it on blotting paper with purple chalk? E.D. Because you know who sneaked my pencil. Noel. Poetry. The Assyrian came down like a wolf on the fold, and the way he came down was awful, I'm told. But it's nothing to the way one of the editors comes down on me if I crumble my bread and butter or spill my tea. Noel. Curious facts. If you hold a guinea pig up by his tail, his eyes drop out. You can't do half the things yourself that children in books do, making models or soon. I wonder why. Alice. If you take a date stone out and put in an almond and eat them together, it is prime. I found this out. Sub-editor. If you put your wet hand into boiling lead, it will not hurt you if you draw it out quickly enough. I have never tried this. Dora. The Purring Class. Instructive article. If I ever keep a school, everything shall be quite different. Nobody shall learn anything they don't want to. And sometimes, instead of having masters and mistresses, we will have cats, and we will dress up in cat skins and learn purring. Now, my dears, the old cat will say, 1, 2, 3, all purr together, and we shall purr like anything. She won't teach us to mew, but we shall know how without teaching. Children do know some things without being taught. Alice. Poetry, translated into French by Dora. Quand j'étais jeune et j'étais fou, j'achetais un violon pour 18 sous, et tous les airs que je jouais était over the hills and far away. Another piece of it. Merci, jolie vache, qui fait bon lait pour mon déjeuner. Tous les matins, tous les soirs. Mon pain je mange, ton lait je boire. Recreation. It is a mistake to think that cats are playful. I often try to get a cat to play with me, and she never seems to care about the game, no matter how little it hurts. H. Oh, making pots and pans with clay is fun, but do not tell the grown-ups. It is better to surprise them, and then you must say at once how easily it washes off, much easier than ink. Dickie. Sam Redfern or the Bushranger's Burial by Dickie. Well, Annie, I have bad news for you, said Mr. Ridgway, as he entered the comfortable dining room of his cabin in the bush. Sam Redfern the bushranger is about this part of the bush just now. I hope he will not attack us with his gang. I hope not, responded Annie, a gentle maiden of some 16 summers. Just then came a knock at the door of the hut, and a gruff voice asked them to open the door. It is Sam Redfern the bushranger, father, said the girl. The same, responded the voice, and the next moment the hall door was smashed in, and Sam Redfern sprang in, followed by his gang. Chapter 2. Annie's father was at once overpowered, and Annie herself lay bound with cords on the drawing-room sofa. Sam Redfern set a guard round the lonely hut, and all human aid was despaired of. But you never know. Far away in the bush a different scene was being enacted. Must be Injuns, said a tall man to himself as he pushed his way through the brushwood. It was Jim Carlton, the celebrated detective. I know them, he added. They are Apaches. Just then, 10 Indians in full war paint appeared. Carlton raised his rifle and fired, and slinging their scalps on his arm, he hastened towards the humble log hut where resided his affianced bride, Annie Ridgway, sometimes known as the Flower of the Bush. Chapter 3. The moon was low on the horizon, and Sam Redfern was seated at a drinking bout with some of his boon companions. They had rifled the cellars of the hut, and the rich wines flowed like water in the golden goblets of Mr. Ridgway. But Annie had made friends with one of the gang, a noble, good-hearted man who had joined Sam Redfern by mistake, and she had told him to go and get the police as quickly as possible. "Ha, ha, 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 ha!" cried Redfern. "Now I am enjoying myself." He little knew that his doom was near upon him. Just then, Annie gave a piercing scream, and Sam Redfern got up, seizing his revolver. "Who are you?" he cried, as a man entered. "I am Jim Carlton, the celebrated detective," said the new arrival. Sam Redfern's revolver dropped from his nerveless fingers, but the next moment he had sprung upon the detective with the well-known activity of the mountain sheep, and Annie shrieked, for she had grown to love the rough bushranger. To be continued at the end of the paper, if there is room. Scholastic. A new slate is horrid till it is washed in milk. I like the green spots on them to draw patterns round. I know a good way to make a slate pencil squeak, but I won't put it in because I don't want to make it common. Sub-editor. Peppermint is a great help with arithmetic. The boy who was second in the Oxford local always did it. He gave me 2. The examiner said to him, "Are you eating peppermints?" And he said, "No, sir." He told me afterwards it was quite true, because he was only sucking one. I'm glad I wasn't asked. I should never have thought of that, and I could have had to say, yes. Oswald. In the Wreck of the Malabar, by Noel, author of A Dream of Ancient Ancestors. He isn't really, but he put it in to make it seem more real. Hark! What is that noise of rolling waves and thunder in the air? 'Tis the death knell of the sailors and officers and passengers of the good ship Malabar. It was a fair and lovely noon when the good ship put out of port, and people said, "Ah, little we think how soon she will be the element's sport." She was indeed a lovely sight, upon the billows with sails spread, but the captain folded his gloomy arms. Ah, if she had been a lifeboat instead! See the captain, stern yet gloomy, flings his son upon a rock, hoping that there his darling boy may escape the wreck. Alas, in vain the loud winds roared, and nobody was saved. That was the wreck of the Malabar. Then let us toll for the brave. Noel. Gardening notes. It is useless to plant cherry stones in the hope of eating the fruit, because they don't. Alice won't lend her gardening tools again, because the last time Noel left them out in the rain, and I don't like it. He said he didn't. Seeds and bulbs. These are useful to play at shop with until you are ready. Not at dinner parties, for they will not grow unless uncooked. Potatoes are not grown with seed, but with chopped up potatoes. Apple trees are grown from twigs, which is less wasteful. Oak trees come from acorns. Everyone knows this. When Noel says he could grow one from a peach stone wrapped up in oak leaves, he shows that he knows nothing about gardening but marigolds. And when I passed by his garden, I thought they seemed just like weeds, now the flowers have been picked. A boy once dared me to eat a bulb. Dogs are very industrious and fond of gardening. Pincher is always planting bones, but they never grow up. There couldn't be a bone tree. I think this is what makes him bark so unhappily at night. He has never tried planting dog biscuit, but he is fonder of bones, and perhaps he wants to be quite sure about them first. Sam Redfern, or the Bushranger's Burial, by Dickey. Chapter 4 and last. This would have been a jolly good story if they had let me finish it at the beginning of the paper, as I wanted to. But now I have forgotten how I meant it to end, and I have lost my book about Red Indians, and all my boys of England have been sneaked. The girls say, good riddance, so I expect they did it. They want me just to put in which Annie married, but I shan't, so they will never know. We have now put everything we can think of into the paper. It takes a lot of thinking about. I don't know how grown-ups manage to write all they do. It must make their heads ache, especially lesson books. Albert next door only wrote one chapter of the serial story, but he could have done some more if he had wanted to. He could not write out any of the things because he cannot spell. He says he can, but it takes him such a long time, he might just as well not be able. There are 1 or 2 things more. I am sick of it, but Dora says she will write them in. Legal answer wanted. A quantity of excellent string is offered if you know whether there really is a law passed about not buying gunpowder under 13. Dickey. The price of this paper is 1 shilling each, and 6pence extra for the picture of the Malabar going down with all hands. If we sell 100 copies, we will write another paper. And so we would have done. But we never did. Albert next door's uncle gave us 2 shillings, that was all. You can't restore fallen fortunes with 2 shillings.